Hi guys, it's Shelly here. Welcome to my channel and thank you for joining me today. On today's video, I'll be sharing with you a full colour along from RJ Hampson's A Frog's Tale. This is the first RJ Hampson book I bought, and I did admire his work from before, but because of the Amazon paper, I never really jumped in and started buying his books. But when this book came out, I could not resist, and I absolutely love this book. And of course, I have started growing my RJ Hampson collection now. Luckily, this book got picked with the random picker for my autumn season colouring, and as per the votes that I got from all the comments that you guys made, it was quite a popular request for a page or for a book to be coloured as a colour along. So yeah, I'm excited to share with you this page. I have thoroughly enjoyed colouring this page, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoy watching the video. Now, I'm a little bit slow with my colouring, so many people might have already done this page. I'm not actually sure, but I don't remember seeing coloured versions of this page. I just can't remember any colour schemes or anything like that, which is a good thing for me so that I can come up with my own colour palette. And yeah, the only thing I could think of for this page, by the way, this page is called Escargot. The only thing I could think about was what colour I wanted the car to be, and I knew the car would have to be blue. As usual, I didn't really have a plan for the rest of the page. I just knew what one element was going to be, and with that in mind, I just decided to work on this page and see how things go. I decided to use alcohol markers, so I'll be using the Ohuhu alcohol markers, the Honolulu series, and I think, yeah, all of the pens that I've picked out are going to be just from the Pastel set of 96 colours. Just in case you are following along and you don't have lots of their sets or the largest set, I decided to just restrict it to the pastel colours. And I think the pastel set, if you're going to use it for basing on your pages, and not just for colouring only with markers, then it's a brilliant set to have. As I always say, for basing, it's nice to have light colours because then you're going to go over with your pencils. So the light base colour that you use would act as your highlight colour. And so that's what I was going to work with. I knew I was going to do lots of layering with my pencils as usual, and so I decided to choose the pastel set for this page. Over the top, I'll be using my most loved pencils, which is the Albrecht Dürer, Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer pencils, and I will be using them dry on this page. I don't think I've activated it at all, although I do activate my pencils on Amazon paper, but for this page, because we're going to be using alcohol markers, I didn't find the need to activate my pencils, and so yeah, I'll just be working with the pencils dry over the top of the markers. And then at the end, I'll be just doing a little bit of embellishment work with paint pens and a very little bit of glitter gel pen. Now, as I always do, I will list down all the supplies I'll be using in the description box below, as well as the colours of the markers, the Ohuhu markers, as well as my pencils. I will list it per element on in the description box below, so it's easy for you to gather your supplies before you get started so that it's a nice relaxing colouring session for you. Along with that, I will be showing you on screen my swatches that I'm using and the numbers and names of the pencils and pens I'll be using as well as I go along. I definitely think on this Amazon paper, now this book is printed in the UK. I do not like Amazon US paper at all. I've only ever had one book from Amazon US and I didn't like the quality of the paper from there. Even the UK one is not great, but I think the one I've tried from Amazon Japan is probably my favourite because I'm able to use water mediums quite well on the Amazon Japan printed paper. However, for the Amazon UK paper, I think a lot of people have already been doing it, but I think the best combination or the best results you're going to get is with a marker base, alcohol markers, and then a pencil over the top. And I think that will be the best method to use for tackling this paper, unless you want to use only pencils, and it can take a while blending those pencils on this paper. And certain pencils, if they're too hard, do still cause the paper to ripple. And I've done one page in this book, which I think I used just pencils, and it ended up rippling the paper, even though I didn't use any water. So yeah, I think I like the combination of markers with pencils on Amazon UK paper. So going forward, I'll probably use that a lot in RJ Hampson's books. And yeah, I really enjoyed actually colouring on this in this book. I think it's his illustrations that do it for me. I would rather he does come out with better quality paper, but I think yeah, it worked perfectly fine, and I like the result that I got. So let's get to it. For this colour along, I will jump in and out with a little bit of chat, a little bit of explanations as I'm colouring, just to sort of keep up with what I'm doing and maybe why I'm doing it or how I'm doing it. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that. I know I do that in a lot of my colour alongs these days, but recently, because of lack of time, I haven't managed to for the last 2 colour alongs, I think. But yeah, on this colour along, I'll be jumping in and out to give you a bit of company. So like I said, the first thing I had thought about was what colour I want the car to be. Now, usually for some reason, I see my cars in either red or blue. But for this page, for some reason, I wanted to have a blue car. And so that's what I went with in my mind. And then I decided that there's a lot of background space, empty space. And I was thinking of what I should do for the background, because that's a lot of background on paper like this, and I wasn't able to use obviously a lot of water mediums, so I had to think about something, think about a background that I could do hopefully alcohol markers with to simplify the background for me. I always like starting with my background, so, or at least figuring out the colours for my background. So I decided to go for quite a bright background, because I was going to I think I sort of had a rough idea that I wanted things to be toned down in the foreground, but I love the combination of pink and yellow for my skies for some reason. I don't know why, but I do tend to go for that quite a lot. And so I decided to put in some clouds in the sky, well, more to the bottom of the sky, so the horizon, and then the top of the sky, leave it without any clouds. And so I decided to do the clouds pink and the sky yellow, the normal combination for me. But I used a stencil to just mark out the clouds, how I wanted the sort of cloud effect to be. And I'm just thinking about, I just remembered that the reason I decided to go for the clouds at the bottom of the sky basically was, at first I was thinking of doing it as smoke from the car, and then I realized that that's not going to be very bright and it's going to be quite dull, and that's a lot of smoke to do from one little car. So I decided to make them clouds. So yeah, I used a stencil to mark out the clouds. I knew I was going for a pink, so I used a very light, I used the light flesh from the Albrecht Dürers just to mark out where I want the clouds to be, rather than just go in freehand, in case I made a mess. Because I was going to use alcohol markers, I wouldn't be able to rectify the mess. So yeah, I marked out my clouds, and then I went in with the alcohol markers in tones of very light pink or flesh toned pinks and peaches. And then, yeah, just decided to make the rest of the sky yellow. And I liked the combination. I think it was nice and bright, and it would work with the other elements that were going to be in the foreground. I think the way I did the yellow part of the sky, keeping the center of the page quite bright, or the brightest, sort of makes your eye at the end of the, once you've finished your work, will get your eyes to focus in on the central image. And for me, the focal point was going to be that car. I wanted the car to stand out. I want everyone to look straight at the car, and hopefully that has worked. So yeah, making the outsides darker and coming in lighter to the center of the sky, I think helped with that. Now, I know a lot of people base their entire page first with their alcohol markers and then go in and do their pencil work. But for me, that doesn't always work, because as I've mentioned before, I don't know what my colors are going to be from the start of my page. So I cannot base my entire page before I go in with pencils. I like to get down some pencil work with the shadows and highlights to see what the rest of my page is going to what other colors I'm going to bring into my page. So I do start off by first basing some elements, and then I will go ahead and do pencil work for those elements, and then come back and base some more, and then go in and finish off the page. Because when I start putting in the depth of my pencil work is when I start seeing the page a bit better, and I know what other colors I'll be able to bring in. So after I based the sky, the clouds in the sky, I knew, like I said, that my car was going to be blue. So I used a few tones of blue, very light blue, to base my car. Now, If you're going to use alcohol markers as the only medium on your page, or you want to use very little pencil at the end, I would probably not go for the pastel set. I would go for a set like the 120 set of Honolulu alcohol markers, or if you have a bigger set, if you have the capacity to have a bigger set, maybe that. You would need some darker shades of markers to bring into your shadow areas if you're going to do only marker work and very minimal pencil work. In my case, I knew I'm going to use pencils because I love my pencil finishes. I love layering with pencils. I just love working with them. I really, I enjoy the sessions that I use pencil the most, my coloring sessions when I use pencils the most, and I find them the most relaxing. So I know I like to do the layering aspect with my pencils, so I decided to go for the pastel set. But if you want to do less pencil work, choose a set or choose some darker shades to get into your shadows from this point, so then you have to do very little pencil work at the end. In my coloring, you'll see that I use very light colors. I do try and put in a little bit of shadows, but not enough to leave it as just that. So yeah, I go for very light blues and base my car as a blue car. But all the while, if I'm not just using one color of marker as a base and I'm using a few other shades, even though they're quite light, I will try and keep in mind where I want my highlight areas to be, so that when I come in with the pencils, I don't lose those highlight areas. I know where the highlight areas are and try and maintain them throughout my coloring. Mr. Frogy was going to be green, so I based him with green. And then I started working on the bottom of the page. The grass I knew was going to be green, but I decided to go for a brighter green. I don't know why, but I felt I wanted some brightness around on this page. So usually I would go for very toned down greens, yellowy greens, and not go for very bright greens. But in this occasion, I just thought that the bright green would really work with this kind of an illustration. It's like a cartoony illustration, isn't it? Like you would get in a picture book. And so yeah, I wanted it to be bright. So bright greens for the grass. And I decided that as I looked at the page, there was the car was sort of on grass, but I decided to break up all that green. I didn't mind it being on grass, but I wanted it to be less green. And just to break up that green, I decided to sort of try and figure out how to put in a road, a dirt road that the car was going to be on. And I don't know if my perspective is right, because I can't draw. I do not understand drawing. Maybe one day in the future, if I have time, I'll try and figure that out. But I just randomly put in a couple of lines to mark out a road. And I had the idea that when I come in with the pencils, I'm going to make it look like a brownish sort of dirt road, because with the car you can sort of see that there's a few bits flying off the car, behind the car as it's driving, and a couple of pebbles. So yeah, a dirt road came to mind. So a couple of things I should have probably mentioned before I started and just came to my mind now is with regards to alcohol markers. When you're colouring with them, first of all, make sure you have some protective papers on the back. I already did set that up because the markers are definitely going to bleed through. Even if you have thick paper, they can always bleed through a little bit because they are alcohol markers. They're not water-based markers, okay? The second thing is, this paper is not alcohol marker specific paper, and so with different papers alcohol markers will work differently. And on Amazon quality paper, the thinness of the paper or the quality of the paper, the alcohol markers tend to bleed or spread. So not just go through the paper, but also spread across the paper. So it's very important that when you are laying down your alcohol markers, you don't go right up to the line art, because more than likely it will just spread out of the line art. So you have to maybe leave ever so slight gap between your marker and the line art, and you'll see that the alcohol markers will just spread a little bit to the point of the line art. So yeah, we just have to be a bit careful with that, more so when you use dark colors. With the light colors, you'll be coloring over it, so you'll probably get covered up. So but with darker markers, darker colors, just be aware that it can spread across your page and go past the line art. So if you don't want that to happen, just leave a little bit of a gap. And whilst the paper is a bit damp with some alcohol markers, and you lay down more alcohol markers, they will tend to bleed and spread a bit more. So keep that in mind as well. But they will blend really nicely when they're slightly wet still. If you let the marker dry and then you go over with another darker shade, for example, for your shadows, then they don't tend to blend as well or at all. It will create a shadow area, but it won't blend with the pencil, with the marker that you've laid down first. So if you want them to blend really seamlessly without any lines, harsh lines between the two colors, then make sure you're laying down the markers as they're still wet, or at least slightly wet, so that they blend really well to give you a more seamless finish. I have done a video on how I colour with alcohol markers, which I'll try and remember to put in the description box below, to give you an idea of probably how to use your alcohol markers, whether to go from dark mid-tone to light tone, or use your light tone, mid-tone, dark tone. So I did sort of test it out and see which one would work best for me, but I have done a video on that, so I won't discuss that on this video. But if you do want to check it out, I'll try to remember to put it in the description box below. If I forget, it is in my playlist, How I Colour playlist, and you can check it out there. And if I'm not mistaken, I did it on an RJ Hampson illustration from this book specifically as well. once my base layers of alcohol markers for the first set of colors were put down, I started working with my pencils, and of course I started with the background first. For the clouds, I had to be careful that I didn't go too dark. I still wanted that pastel effect that I have got going, and so I chose very light pinks and tried to limit it to the shadow areas that I sort of created already, and keep the highlight areas uncolored, so just with the alcohol base that I have left. I matched up the colours pretty well with the colours I have in the Faber Castell set, and just sort of deepened up the shadows a little bit more. And yeah, they look like candy floss clouds to me. I liked that effect. I could already picture that the blue will really stand out against those pinks, and so I was liking it already. And I noticed, and I think this might be a fluke, but maybe it was sort of on the back of my mind, that the way I had laid out the stencils for the clouds sort of brings your eye in again to the car. So keeping the clouds higher on the board, like sort of on the edges of the illustration, and bringing them lower towards the car. So when it comes behind, exactly behind the car, the clouds are sort of lowered down on the page, again helped with bringing your eye in towards the car. So I really like how I'd laid down the shapes of the clouds. I show you how I do a few of the clouds, and then I'll do the rest off camera because it will be quite repetitive. And yeah, I tend to do that a lot in my colouring, as you guys know. So yeah, I'll show you a few clouds and then do the rest off camera. For the sky, I decided, for the yellow part of the sky, I just decided to leave it as it is until the end to see whether I need to add any depth to the borders of the sky. I did not want to do too much now in case I didn't need it. So for now, I didn't do any pencil work for the yellow part of the sky. So, our Mr. Frogarty. Now, I've colored Mr. Frogarty maybe a couple of. This is the third one I'm coloring actually in this book. I always tend to go for yellowish greens, the greens that I love using. So olivey, yellowish greens, and I added a hint of yellow just to give it a bit of interest on his skin. And so, yeah, I used my yellowy greens, and I knew I was going to go for the brighter greens for the grass. So I thought that would work really well just to give it a bit of difference, a different green tones for him compared to what I was going to use for the grass. So the element, as I said at the beginning, that jumped out at me was the car. And so I was most excited to color the car on this page. And I had already got sort of a vision of what kind of colors I wanted for the blue. I'd just gone for the deep, rich blues, dark blues, but I wanted to make sure that I have very light highlight area so that the car looks shiny. Now, there wasn't actually that much area to do the shadowing because it's sort of broken up with the tires that are there and the lights and things like that. But I think I managed to get the kind of colors I wanted, the deepness of the blues that I wanted on the page. So as always, lots of layering, guys. That's the kind of coloring I like, is layering. And so I went in with very light blues that sort of matched up to the base alcohol color that we had placed. And then I deepened up the shadows a lot. And I just worked with, not really with light source, but as you guys know, I like to try and create the 3D effects of an element. And using light source is quite complicated and challenging when you have lots going on a page. So what I try to do is just work with the element and trying to figure out what objects on the element or what needs to look like it's in further forward in front of an element and what's behind an element. And I work with that with regards to where I'm going to lay down my shadow areas. And as you guys know, I always work from my shadows to my highlights to maintain my highlight areas. And I tried to keep them very light. I knew I could bring back the highlights with a little bit of a white pencil over the markers, which will brighten up the area. Or if I lost it completely, then with paint pens at the end of my pencil work. But I just tried to work with what I had with regards to, we had some light bulbs there, not light bulbs, the headlights there, the part of the car that is behind the tires need to be a bit darker so that the tires look like they're further forward or the car is behind the tire. So I use those kind of elements to figure out where I'm going to put my shadows to create that 3D effect on the car. And so I just laid down my shadow areas, trying to make sure that those particular elements sort of popped in front of the car. Hopefully that makes sense. What I have noticed is when I do use alcohol markers, even though I use a very light base, as like on this page, when I've used a light base, I do still layer up, but I do tend to use fewer shades of pencils than I do when I have no base at all. So I still use a few colors of blues, so like a light, a mid-tone and very dark tone, but I feel less of a need to use a whole load of pencils to create my layered effect than I would need to without that base. So it still does cut down on coloring time and on how much pencil work you're doing, even when laying down a very light base, because you already have your base highlight color, and then you're just sort of deepening up mainly the shadow areas. I had laid down some blue base on certain parts of the car, which then, as I was coloring, adding in the blues, I decided I needed to break up the blue ever so slightly, not with a very different color, but just so that it wasn't too blue. And so I decided to make sort of the rims, the bumper and the rims of the car and the sort of pipe work, wire work or whatever is underneath the car, a black, more of a black color, just to differentiate it a little bit from the bright blues that I was using and to give it a bit of interest to the car. After the car was coloured, I decided to work on the other elements that I'd based. So that's basically the road and the grass. For the grass, I tried to maintain the brightness. I still pulled out some of the greens I tend to use, but I think the fact that I had a very bright base sort of helped, so it didn't look like the yellowish green tones that I usually go for. It still had that effect of being bright, and I tried to maintain the highlight alcohol base layer as much as possible in my highlight areas, and just deepen up again my shadow areas. So I tried to put the shadows sort of under the other elements like the flowers and the tortoises, just to try and make them pop again and sort of give the 3D effect of a shadow being created by the tortoises and the flowers, and that sort of just helps them pop off the page. So I just worked with putting my shadow areas around those elements, and maintain the rest of the highlight areas. For the dirt track, the dirt road, I didn't really know what I was going to do, what colors I was going to go for, but I knew that I didn't want the browns to be very yellowy browns, because I could already see that there was so much color on the page. And so I tried to go for more sort of natural browns. Is that even, I don't know if that's the right technical term, but the nougat color in the Faber Castell set is actually quite a nice color for me. I tend to use it a lot when I don't want a very reddish brown and I don't want a very yellowish brown. So it's just sort of in the middle. And so I tried to work with that and just create some shadows and texture to the road, really. And I was trying, and I don't think it worked perfectly, but I was trying to create a shadow under the car to make it a bit darker. I'm not sure if it worked, just to, again, help with the 3D effect that there's a shadow being created by the car. There's some light from sort of behind the car, so we are getting a bit of a shadow, but I don't think it worked too well. But I think I was a bit hesitant because I didn't want the brown to get too dark, and so I don't really think I managed to bring out that effect, but that was sort of what was on my mind, that I was trying to create a shadow under the car. So the first bits of basing and pencil work were done, and I was able to sort of step back and see what else I needed to bring to the page. And I really like colouring this way because I can't always picture my end result, what I want my page to be right at the end. It sort of just develops as I'm colouring. The colours come to mind, or my next ideas come to mind as I'm colouring a page. And so I like to do it this way and just break it up so that I can sort of take a step back and say, okay, now what's going to come next? So when I stepped back at this point and looked at my page, I saw that I've got so much colour on the page already, from the sort of pink clouds and the yellow sky and the bright green grass, and of course my blue car. And I wanted that blue car to be the focal point, like I said, and at the moment it sort of was the focal point because it was a much darker element compared to all the other colours that I'd used on the page. And so I knew at this point that, okay, I cannot add that many more colours or different colours that I already have on the page. Otherwise, it will take away from that blue car, and I didn't want that to happen. So the next thing was to just start thinking about what colour clothing Mr. Frogy is going to wear, what colour the snails are going to be, and the flowers and the tortoises. So in I go with the basing again. I decided to first base the rest of the elements on the car. So I knew the tires were now going to be black, and I just sort of worked with laying down those colours. And then I went ahead and thought about Mr. Frogy's clothing. When I had first started basing the page, so when I'd done my yellow basing for the sky, the pink basing for the clouds, and the blue for the car, at that point in time, without the pencil work, I had thought that I was going to go for red clothing for Mr. Frogy, and that would probably work. But I realised at this stage, after I'd done the pencil work for all those elements, that it would turn out quite bright, and it might take away the focal point that I wanted, which was the car. And so I decided that instead of going for red, I was going to go for browns and keep it more neutral, but go for the reddish browns for Mr. Frogy's clothing. And so I just started basing with a bit of brown alcohol markers. I based his hat and his coat to be brown, but I wasn't so sure what I was going to do with the goggles and the scarf yet. So I left that out. I was thinking that I may need to bring in another colour. So again, I just left that out for now. And basing the snails, I decided that the snails were going to be, again, going for slightly neutral colours because I didn't want the eyes to go away from the car. And so I decided to go for, again, yellowish oranges, but in my mind I had that it was going to be a much darker orange than sort of what we have on the page. So we have a little bit of orange sort of tones to the sky in the background. So the snails are going to need to stand out from that. So I was just going to add in a bit of darker oranges to the snails' shells and keep the body of the snails quite neutral. Keeping in mind that I didn't want to add any new colours, I decided that the flags on the bottom of the page were going to be, I would just bring in the blues from the car, maybe not as dark, but I just based it for now with blues. And the tortoises, now I choose conventional colours quite a lot, so I knew that the tortoises were going to be green for me. And so I thought it worked on this page anyways because I didn't want to add any new colours, but I needed to make sure that the tortoises stood out from the green grass because they were right up against it, and so the greens had to be different for the tortoises to stand out. So I decided to just go for the greens that I used on Mr. Frogy for their shell, just stick with sort of greens and yellowish browns for now for the tortoises. And I thought that would be different enough from the grass for the tortoises to stand out, and it sort of ties in the other greens that I've used on Mr. Frogy. If you notice, I haven't based the flowers or the butterfly or the scarf and goggles yet, like I mentioned, and the frame of the picture as well, because I didn't know what colours I was going to use for those. Again, I was at a stage where I said, okay, let me lay down more colour and hopefully I'll be able to visualize what the rest of those elements are going to be. Following the basing, I came and did the pencil work as I have already explained. So browns for the clothing, using the same greens that I used on Mr. Frogy for the tortoises, and I sort of stuck to the terracotta sort of oranges for the snail's shells, and I brought in a bit of grey to keep it neutral for the body. And yeah, I just worked on filling in all those elements, the car tires, which was quite simple. I used a little bit of blender pencil so that I didn't have to do too much pencil layering. So I just laid down a bit of black over the grey alcohol marker base I'd applied, and then I used a blender pencil to blend it out so that I didn't have to use too much layering, and just smoothed out the pencil, and used a bit of white as well to give it some highlight areas. And yeah, so I just filled up all those elements I'd based with pencil. once I'd done the pencil work over the based elements, I then could see the remaining elements which had not been coloured, and I could see a bit better what colours I was going to bring in. Originally, like I said, I had thought of doing red for Mr. Fogarty's clothing, but I had seen that that was not going to work in a larger area because it would take away from the blue car. However, now that I'd got fewer elements left to colour, I could see that the red could work, and I decided to make the scarf and the goggles an orangish red, and I think that works wonderful with the colours I have on the page. So I just went ahead, didn't bother with alcohol basing, I just went ahead with pencils now because there were such few elements left and I didn't want to go back and forth. So I just went ahead and did it directly with pencil. There were a few elements that I hadn't coloured yet, such as Mr. Fogarty's tongue and mouth and the eyes. I just put in a little bit of shadowing, so I started filling in those areas, the smoke coming out of the cigar. So all of those little elements I just started filling up with colour. The headlights, I decided to go for a yellowish orange again because we've brought in a bit of orange now, a brighter orange in the scarf. So I decided to bring that into the headlights because that would pop out a little bit more against the blue. Otherwise, I would have just done it as a sort of glass or light blue, but I didn't think that would work because the car was blue. So I went ahead with a little bit of a yellowish, brighter yellow for the headlights, and I brought in that similar colour to the butterfly as well, so I didn't have to introduce another colour. I left the little patterns, so the flower or the circles that are on the wings of the butterfly, I left them without any colour. I thought I'd come in with a bit of glitter gel pen at the end just to add such a tiny bit of sparkle on this page, but yeah. And the body of the butterfly, I would have usually gone for black, but I wanted a hint of brown just to tone down the intensity of black. I thought a brownish hint would look better, so I added a bit of brown to the body. I know it's such a small element, but I think I do have a little bit of I like to look at all the little details on a page, and so I know it's such a small element, not worth really talking about, but it makes a difference to me. I'm just sort of explaining my thought process and what was sort of going through my mind when I was colouring. So when I looked at the butterfly, I know it's so small, yet adding that little bit of just black would sort of draw your eyes to the butterfly because it would be so intense black. And so it was something that actually came in my mind and thought, no, I can't go all black. Let me add a little bit of brown to tone down that intensity of the body of the butterfly. And I just thought I'd share it with you guys. And the flowers on the bottom of the page, there's just a couple of them. I, again, didn't want to add any new colours. I thought that because I've used a bit of red in the scarf and the goggles on Mr. Fogarty, I just brought in those colours for the flowers with a little bit of more pink tone to it. And again, used browns for the centre of the flowers. Now comes to the frame, and I left this till the end because I wasn't sure what color to do the frame, what colors were going to work. And usually I tend to go for a gold frame. I don't know why, but just naturally when I see a frame, I think gold, maybe antique gold, yellowy gold, but gold. And that's what I had thought when I hadn't even started laying down color on this page. In my mind, I already thought that, okay, I'm going to have a gold frame at the end, but I'll keep it to the end just in case. And when it came to it, I didn't think gold was going to work because I had so much yellow and brown on the page that I didn't think my antique gold or my yellow golds were going to work. It wouldn't stand out as much, and it would maybe take away from, the yellow sky, for example. So I needed something a little bit different to still stand out and give a nice effect of a frame, but work with the rest of the colors that I have. So I decided to go for a greeny gold sort of tone, and I used olive green for that, which works with some of the greens that I've laid down on the page, Mr. Frogy, as well as the turtles. And I used browns over the top of it, just to bring in that sort of brownish effect and sort of create a greenish gold rather than a yellow gold. And I think that works great because it sort of works like as if it is the leaves and vines, for example, or stems, but it's still not so green that it takes away from the brighter greens that I've used within the picture. So the olive green with the ivory that I use for the frame really works, I think, well for this particular page, and I just deepened up the shadows with browns and black. And yeah, I think it worked really great. And I knew I was going to go in with a bit of paint pen just to brighten up that frame as well. And I think that works great. And I'm glad I left the frame till the end, because otherwise I would have not got the right color that would work with this page. I sort of still needed the framework to sort of stand out. I will show you the color combinations and how I color the half of the frame on screen, and I'll do the rest of it off screen because you'll get an idea what I'm doing. It's exactly the same on the other side, just to show you where the shadows were going to be and where the highlights were going to be. that's it, guys. That's all the pencil work done, and I absolutely loved coloring this page, and I love how it's come to life. So the next thing for me after pencil work is embellishments. I always leave my paint pen work, my glitter gel pen work to the end. I don't like to do it as I go along. I prefer doing it right at the end when I've seen all the colors that are on the page. I use very few colors of paint pens to bring in a little bit of highlight areas, cover up a little bit of black lines, and I think it sort of helps just make the page pop a little bit more, which is why I like doing it. I don't think I've gone overboard for this page. I just wanted to create a few areas of highlight. And following doing the paint pen work, I go ahead and just put in a little bit of glitter gel pen. More than anything, it's just to fill up the tiny details that I hadn't colored with pencil. I didn't know what colors they were going to be, and just to fill those up, I use a bit of glitter gel pen. I don't feel this page needs a lot of glitter and shine, any sparkle and shine on the page. So yeah, it's very limited. And yeah, I'll show you what colors I'm using and as I go along for this section as well on screen. And once the embellishments are done, that will be the end of the page, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed coloring it. I really had fun, and I just love how this page has turned out. I get excited seeing what my pages are going to turn out like, because like I said, I can't visualize from a black and white page what my page is going to look like at the end. And so as I'm coloring and as I see it sort of developing and coming to life, it's really exciting because I want to get to the end and see what the end result is, because I haven't pictured the end result yet. And so when I step back at the end and see what I've produced, it's always exciting to see that. So yeah, I think that's a good thing, that I can't plan out a whole page at the beginning, because it just leaves that little bit of mystery till the end of the page. And I think it's turned out wonderful. I wanted that blue car to pop off the page, or to be the center of attraction, and I think it is, or center of attention it is. And I think what helps it the most is what I did for the sky, and I think that's more a fluke than anything. I just thought I would do whatever I wanted for the sky, but I think it worked. The way the clouds are positioned, it sort of brings your eyes into the center of the page, which is where the car is. The yellow sky as well, you know, becoming lighter to the center of the sky, again helps your eyes sort of draw into the middle of the illustration, and yeah, draws you into the blue car that I wanted you to look at. So yeah, I really enjoyed coloring this page. I loved using the markers with pencils, and I like that my page hasn't wrinkled completely. I don't usually mind a little bit of crinkling of a page, but when it comes to Amazon books, sometimes they crinkle way too much. But this page has been left pristine, which is good. It's nice and flat, and I love the colors, and I just like the effect that this page has produced, and I hope you guys do too. For those of you who had voted to watch this, to have this book as a color along on the channel, I hope you guys enjoyed my choice of page and how it has turned out, and I hope you guys do follow along, and make sure you share it with me on Instagram, on email. Like I always say, it just makes my day just to see that someone is watching my color alongs. They take so long to make, and it just brings a little bit of joy to me when I see your versions of the same page. So yeah, make sure you share it with me, and I'll leave you guys to it now. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys enjoyed spending a bit of time with me, and I'll be back with you guys again soon. So until the next one, take care. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.